This is Vicki Austin. Good morning, this is Vicki Austin from the Wheaton Chamber of Commerce. So pleased to welcome you all here today for our Diversity Matters, a new mindset for today's leaders. We want to first and foremost thank Innovation DuPage. Katie Urim is here on the call. We want to thank you all at Innovation DuPage for co-sponsoring this, for underwriting the operational costs of this. And with that, I am going to immediately turn the podium over to Shefali Trivedi. Shefali is the Executive Director of Giving DuPage, and she will be moderating today's conversation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our awesome, exciting three-part series on Diversity Matters, a new mindset for today's leaders. I had the pleasure of serving on the Chamber's DEI committee, and we really thought very carefully. The committee is less than a year old, but we really wanted to come out of the gates swinging with some programs that we felt were going to be useful. There's people across the chamber who really want to sort of focus on DEI initiatives and issues and figure out how to apply this in our own organizations or companies. And we really wanted to start with like just some basic understandings or how can we get everyone sort of working off the same playbook from the beginning. And it started with a question of like, well, what does diversity look like in Wheaton and DuPage County and in our region? And so that's why we started with this program. I'm super excited to turn it over to our first speaker. So let me go ahead and share the screen here on my end. And I'm looking at two screens, so I'm going to look away. Don't think I'm not paying attention, but I am. But I want to go ahead and turn it over so we can respect everyone's time to our first speaker, who is Dave Roth, the Executive Director of the DuPage Federation. And I'll be the timekeeper as well as the slide advancer. So I'll put myself on mute, but Dave, let me go ahead and hand it over to you and feel free to share what you're going to share in terms of demographics in DuPage County.
All right, Shefali, thank you very much. Hey, good morning to everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning, and I hope that the demographic information that I share here will help you be the good neighbor that you want to be. Shefali mentioned working from a common playbook. I want you to know that the information that I'm going to share from you is from our region's common playbook. It's the website of the Chicago Metropolitan Planning Authority, CMAP, and this data is available to all of you. I just hope that kind of consolidating it here will be a help to Wheaton and to the chamber and to you as you seek to be a good neighbor. What I'm going to do through my presentation today is first share an insight from the U.S. Census Bureau regarding 2020 census results to set a context for Wheaton. Then I'll share current demographic data about Wheaton by race and origin and language and change over time. Then I'll compare Wheaton demographics and changes to the county and then to the 7-county region. And then I'd like to share with you a projection from CMAP about demographic change that will continue through 2050. So first, a word about DuPage Federation and why I'm here today. We are a planning council for human services. We want the human service system in DuPage and surrounding areas to be the best it can be so that all our neighbors have the opportunity for optimal well-being and health with no one disadvantaged by race or origin or other identity. Demographic data regarding race and origin identities are important in our planning because when done well, they give voice and visibility to the entire community in all its diversity. Good planning requires inclusion and representation of diverse voices. Second, demographic data help us identify unfairness in the well-being of our neighbors and then guide planning to eliminate the unfairness. So to start, what you see here is on your title slide, I have included a snippet of a quote from the U.S. Census Bureau. And what I'd like to do is read to you a little more fully from that quote. On August 12th of 2021, the Census Bureau released its first data sets from Census 2020 decennial count of the population of the United States for the purpose of redistricting. At that time, Nicholas Jones, Director and Senior Advisor for Race and Ethnicity Research and Outreach at the Census Bureau, said this: "As the country has grown, we have continued to evolve in how we measure the race and ethnicity of the people who live here. Today's release of census redistricting data provides a new snapshot of the racial and ethnic composition and diversity of the country. The improvements we made to the 2020 census yield a more accurate portrait of how people self-identify in response to two separate questions on Hispanic origin and race." And this is the key part that he says, revealing that the US population is much more multiracial and more diverse than we had measured in the past. I want that thought in your mind as we begin to take a look specifically at Wheaton, then our county, and then the region. So please advance the slide, Shefali. All right, so let's look at Wheaton. Here is information extracted from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. The chart on the top is general population characteristics. This chart and this data is based on the actual decennial census counts in 2000, 2010, and 2020. So you'll see here the census counted 53,970 people in Wheaton, and that's a 2% increase over 10 years ago. The increase in Wheaton is just a little greater than the increase in DuPage and in the region. Looking at the chart on the bottom, that is race and ethnicity changes over time. This is not based on the decennial count. This is based on the American Community Survey. And the ACS is a sampling survey, so it represents our best estimate of change. Here's the ACS estimates over the past 10 years. In Wheaton, people identifying as Hispanic or Latino increased 27%. People identifying as Black increased 38%. People identifying as Asian increased 26%. And people identifying as other or multiple races increased 28%. And the corresponding decrease that you see there, of course, is in the population that identifies as white. Next slide, please. This slide, the top chart, is also an ACS survey estimate that estimates the increase in the number of persons in Wheaton who are foreign-born rather than native-born. It's an increase of 16% to bring those who identify as foreign-born as 12.4% of the community. The bottom chart in Wheaton, the ACS estimates a slight increase in the number of families who speak a language other than English at home, and a slight increase in the number of families who speak English less than very well. And I want to note to you the places for growth in languages other than English. More families are speaking other Asian languages, Korean, and Arabic at home. I want to pause for a moment to look at the number of folks speaking Arabic and use that as a way to encourage you and Wheaton to be sensitive to a change that's happening in your community that the census has not done a good job of capturing. You see here that Arabic is now perhaps the third single most spoken language in the community after English and Spanish. And yet within the current census categories, there's not a category for the race or origin of people who speak Arabic. There has developed in the last 10 years a movement to incorporate a Middle Eastern and North African category for the census. It was very close to inclusion in the 2020 census, but it didn't make it across the finish line. So the census representations that we're going to see from 2020 will continue to mask the presence of the Arab American or MENA population, but you don't need to ignore that in your community. You can be sensitive to that, and you can be looking and listening and engaging the Arabic speaking and those folks who identify from the Middle East and North Africa. Next slide, please. This chart is population changes by race and origin for all 7 counties in the CMAP region. I want to draw your attention to DuPage County, which is the second from the left in the bar chart as you move from left to right. And you see that DuPage showed population reduction for people who identify as white and increases in all other categories. We're going through these very quickly. I wish I could go into a little bit more depth, but you will see that DuPage reflects the region in many ways, with one exception. The reduction in those who identify as Black in Cook County is so large that the region experienced a reduction in the number of folks who identify as Black. That's not true in DuPage. We experienced an increase. All right, so next slide, please, Shefali. All right, this slide illustrates 30 years of demographic change in the entire region. So each bar on this graph represents all 7 counties of the CMAP region. So DuPage, of course, is a part of that. But this is a wonderful visual of the way that change is happening. And you'll note here that over this 30-year period, that there's a consistency, and that is that white and Black populations decrease region-wide, while Hispanic, Asian, and other, including 2 or more races, continue to increase. And I want to note again, this is all 7 counties. This is not DuPage County and alone, and not Wheaton alone. So in DuPage County and in Wheaton both, we're seeing an increase in those who identify as Black. That's a little different than the entire region as a whole. Now, as you look at this slide, I want you to keep the visual image here of the trend lines that you're seeing, where who's growing and who's reducing in population, because when I show you the next slide, which is the way that CMAP projects population and demographic changes 30 years into the future, what you'll see is that although it's a different type of an image, the trend lines remain the same. So Shefali, would you advance that slide? So this is an estimate of the population change that's going to be happening in the entire region over the next 30 years. And this estimate was put together, this projection was put together 5 years ago. And these circles are a little more difficult to read, and the numbers are a little small for your screen here. But notice that it follows the same pattern as the previous bar graph that you looked at. And that is, you see increases in other races and 2 or more races, increases in Asian identity, increases in Hispanic identity, and reductions in those who identify as white or Black. Now, I want to also kind of bring an object lesson with this chart. It was 5 years ago that our top planners at CMAP put together this projection for the future. This is the best minds that we have working on data and demographics. And you'll note in their 2050 projection that the percentage they show for other race, those who identify as other or 2 or more races, is shown at 1.8%. So Shefali, are you able to reverse a slide? Can you go back one? So if you look at the bar on the right, the actual count from 2020, the decennial count from 2020, the top of the bar there shows you that already in 2020, 3.3% of the region's population identify as other or two or more races. So the pace of change in that area is so much faster than was predicted 5 years ago. And I think that's an important insight for this group to keep in mind. One more caveat, because the 2020 census changed the way in which the Census Bureau asked about race, I think that might have something to do with why CMAP is having difficulty using actual 2020 data right now for comparative purposes. I'm sure they're working through ways to do that accurately. In the meantime, they have posted a fantastic website that allows you to visit and view demographics as counted in the 2020 count in for race and origin. And forgive me for the kind of inelegance of this, but the very first slide of this set of slides has the link to that map. So you can drill down to the state, county, and census tract level. You can't go to a Wheaton, but you can go to census tracts and look at actual counts for race and origin. But what you won't find is comparisons to earlier years, because they're still, I believe, figuring out how to do those comparisons fairly since they've collected the information in a new way. So I hope that gives you some insights into how you can do your planning and work to be a better neighbor.
Thank you, Dave. That was excellent. I know folks must have some questions. We are going to have time for Q&A at the end, but without further ado, and I really appreciate that, that link that Dave shared on the first slide is definitely fun. If you start clicking on that, I promise you it'll feel like a rabbit hole and you'll keep clicking on different tracks, census tract data as well. So it's really a great interactive tool. Please allow me to introduce our next speaker, Jacob Kniep, who is the founder of OUTSpoken Leaders. Jacob is going to be talking about the LGBTQ plus community. And I have to tell you, I don't think we've seen a lot of speakers talking about this particular portion of our diverse community. So I'm going to turn it over to Jacob without further ado.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Shefali, and thank you, Dave. So I kept my presentation today short and sweet. I know that we've all got work to get to and we've all got business. I wanted to make sure that I hit on all of the important things. I won't take up my entire 15 minutes, so we'll have lots of time at the end for question and answer. So the first question, I wanted to kind of answer is, what is LGBTQIA2+? So when we're looking at DuPage County, and when we're looking at Wheaton, when we're looking at Chicago, it's really hard to measure, who is diverse and who, is, quote unquote, different from who we are. How can we reach out to them? How can we be inclusive to them? The main takeaway that I want you guys to take today is that the LGBTQ community is ever expanding and ever growing, and you will kind of see that it kind of incorporates more people than what we may have thought previous. Shefali, can you go to the next slide? So first off, LGBTQIA2+ is the long acronym for everybody in the LGBT community. So that would be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning folks, intersex people, asexual people, two-spirit, and countless other ways in which people choose to self-identify. So us at OUTSpoken Leaders have incorporated a feeling of the plus. And what that means is, everybody can kind of be lumped into the LGBTQ plus community, regardless of sexual identity, regardless of gender identity, anything like that. Because really what the LGBTQ community is it's a community of people who are working together to ensure that we're all included in every single thing that we do, every single business that we go to. So this being said, this list is long and like I said, ever expanding. So if you're a business owner here in DuPage, Wheaton, wherever you may be, you have to understand that, the people walking in and out of your doors every day may not identify the way that you think that they're identifying. So you can't really tell that somebody is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, two-spirit, or anything else just by the way that they look. So when Shefali and Joshua both, kind of approached me to talk about this and like, what does diversity look like in our community? It looks like you and I. So there's really no way to be like, we have to, make sure that we're focusing on the queer community, we're focusing on this community, we're just a community of people coming together day in and day out to ensure that Wheaton, DuPage County, and all of Illinois are a great place to live for every single individual here. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So go ahead and go to the next slide after that. So the LGBTQ plus data is very hard to track because I know that Dave mentioned a few times, census data isn't, always 100% accurate to break down every single identity that somebody may have. Sometimes questions are different than others. So I had to kind of scour different sources to figure out, what this data looks like, DuPage County specifically. So the big thing that I took away that I was not aware of, even running an LGBT nonprofit, is that we see a huge increase of the LGBT community between the ages of 18 to 24 and 25 to 35. We're looking at 33% and 28% respectively. So when we're talking about, millennials or Gen Xers, is that who's above millennials? We're talking about closer to 30%, a third of the people who are, in that age range are identifying as LGBTQ plus. And I know from, the marketing that we do that I work at, that's kind of the clientele that we want, is that 18 to 35 age range, because, they've got more buying power, they've got more opinions, they've got more numbers in most cases. So when we think about, we're trying to market to these people, and now knowing that a third of them do identify as LGBTQ plus, taking that into consideration is going to be severely important kind of going forward for all businesses to be like, hey, how can we create an inclusive environment for the LGBT in my business, in my nonprofit, in, my day-to-day work? But, beyond that, we're still looking at least 20% LGBT identifying folks from age 35 to 49. And then it does drop kind of going into age 50, where we're looking at, 16%. And then anything 65 plus, we're looking at only 8%. But that just shows, kind of going forward, more and more people are identifying as LGBTQ plus. The environment's different. And like I said at the beginning of this presentation, that acronym is ever expanding. More people are experiencing life, differently than what is traditional nuclear family. So Shefali reached out to me and she was like, well, what do, the leaders of this community, all of you folks here, what do they need to know to help kind of support the LGBT community? And all I have to say is, this is the first step. As somebody who is technically a marginalized community, as somebody who does identify as transgender, I want to say, thank you to everybody who showed up, at least for this one, for this meeting, knowing that you are here trying to make a difference in your business, in your community, and kind of going forward, just really making sure that we're not singling people out when we are trying to help them out. I and the OUTSpoken Leaders community, we dive into a inclusive space training that we talk about only doing LGBT inclusion training, which you can find out more on our website. But like I said, this is the first step of trying to make Wheaton, DuPage County, and Illinois a better place for everybody to live. And I just want to thank you all for showing up. I hope information is helpful to kind of understand what the community looks like kind of going forward. And hopefully this opened some people's eyes as to, we're not just, few and far between. We are, we're looking at 20 to 25,000 people kind of in different age ranges that, identify as LGBTQ plus. Told you, short and sweet.
Great, Jacob. That's really great information. And I really appreciate your positive comments in terms of, I think you're right. It is very encouraging to know that over 70, almost 80 people registered for this program, knowing that we were going to be addressing topics around diversity and inclusion. And I think this really is an indicator of how many people are very interested in making sure that we are all striving towards greater inclusivity. And so I really appreciate it. And Jacob, I can appreciate your challenges. I don't know of any real data source that actually captures information about people who identify in LGBTQ plus, and I'm not going to go into the full thing because I can't remember all of it, but I think it is helpful to even understand that there's a lot of different ways that people self-identify. And so already that's a common theme, right? Sort of Dave referred to that as well, in terms of people identifying with one or two or more races, and it seems clearly when it comes to sexual identity or just identity in general, when it comes to LGBTQ plus, like that's an issue here as well. So thank you very much for at least even capturing this data. I didn't even know how you were going to go about getting this, because I don't know of any agency that really collects this. So just the fact that we have a number on it, and knowing there's over 25,000 plus individuals who are falling in this category is really helpful. Thank you so much. I will move on, and we are looking good on time, so that'll leave us more time for questions and answers. Please start gathering up your questions and answers, and then we'll do a quick wrap up at the end. Want to introduce Carlos Johnson, who is with DONKA Inc., and Kate Beck, who is with AbilityLinks, who are going to talk more about inclusion in the workplace. So let me go ahead and turn it over to those folks. And Carlos and Kate, I'm not sure who's up on deck first, but I trust you know. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Good morning, everyone. So just to get started, defining a disability. An individual with a disability is defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. A person who has a history or record of such impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having such an impairment. So that's just a general little definition for you all to get started.
Right, and then we'll look at the types of disabilities. There's various types: ambulatory, those with walking impediments, hearing disabilities, cognitive, looking at those with intellectual disabilities there, vision, independent living, self-care, and neuropsychiatric disorders, those with mental health issues. So these are the kind of the most common types of disabilities that have been listed, or that we find people stating that they've been diagnosed with.
So how do these disabilities translate to DuPage County? The entire population of DuPage County is 919,545 individuals. 8% of the population, however, though, is individuals with disabilities, and that translates to 73,563.6 individuals. So when talking about employment for individuals with disabilities, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics came out with this data showing that 17.9% of individuals with a disability are employed, compared to 61.8% of individuals without a disability. So you can see that there is a very big difference between those two groups. When we look at the unemployment side, we see that 12.6% of individuals with a disability are unemployed, compared to 7.9% of individuals living without a disability.
Next slide. And then if we look at specifically in the state of Illinois, when we talk about employment numbers, for the entire state of Illinois, 35.3% of individuals with a disability are employed, and 76% of individuals without a disability are employed. So we just noticed right there, there's just another huge gap in the employment numbers. And if you look at even Chicago there, it states that without a disability, 72%, and then 29% specifically in Chicago there. So the disparities begin to show kind of very quickly when we look at the employment numbers, unemployment numbers, however you want to look at it, of those that are with disability and those without disability. and what that kind of means overall for individuals. And then individuals with disabilities are 2 times more likely to live in poverty in DuPage County. So in DuPage County, our poverty level with this chart here of the 2019 chart, say 6.4% live in poverty in the county. Those with a disability, though, that number jumps to 15.4%. So that's more than double. And if we look and say, even if you say, okay, well, 15% is still kind of low, but if you translate that into actual individuals and people, that's over 7,000 people that are living in poverty with a disability. So that kind of right there lets us know individuals are many times not working, living in poverty, and have other barriers more than likely in their everyday life. And so that speaks to the needs for programs and services and resources surrounding those with disabilities.
So our question now to all of you is to look at your own company and think of how many individuals with a disability do you employ? The industry standard is 1 to 3%. Coming from our line's work, we notice that a lot of employers don't know that number concretely. And so just some history as well. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act set a utilization goal for all employers who did business with the federal government, trying to improve the employment rate for individuals with disabilities as 7% of employees in each job category or 7% of the total workforce. This was just one beginning initiative, just trying to increase employment for all individuals with disabilities. And then the benefits of hiring inclusively. For the job seeker with a disability, the benefits include an improved quality of life and income, enhanced self-confidence, expanded social network, and a sense of community. They're less likely to be in poverty when they're employed. And then on the employer side, you're going to see an inclusive work culture and ability awareness, the competitive advantage, diverse customers, customer loyalty, satisfaction, innovation, productivity, work ethic, and safety. There's also improvements in profitability, higher employee loyalty, higher turnover and retention, reliability, punctuality, profits, and cost effectiveness, as well as company image.
Here's a sample of a disability inclusion statement. Affirming policy statements the company's commitment to equal employment opportunity for people with disabilities and taking affirmative steps to employ, retain, and advance qualified individuals with disabilities at all levels. And I really like the bottom half of the statement where it says advance qualified individuals with disabilities. That means certainly we're hiring people that have disabilities, but we're also saying we're not going to let, as an employer, we're not going to let someone disability stop them from being promoted or advancing through the company. We're going to make the accommodations that are needed, reasonably for that individual to have a great workplace experience there. Next slide. One company that me and Kate both have partnership with and work with is the Bazaar Inc. They've really kind of leading the way in Chicagoland when it talks about hiring people with disabilities. Kate mentioned the standard 7%, and then most of the time is 1 to 3%. The Bazaar has a 36% head count of individuals with disabilities, second chance, formerly incarcerated, those who've experienced homelessness, and veterans. And I'll just read their statement. The culture of care we've created isn't just about showing kindness. It's also about investing in the people who put in hard work and contribute to making the Bazaar what it is. Diverse teams that thrive with a broad range of differences in an environment where differences are valued, practices are equitable, and everyone shares a sense of a belonging. And I think I agree with them, creating purposeful work, dissolving stigma. I think that's a bullseye there, that many times when people are thinking of employment or applying for jobs and they have a disability, there's a stigma surrounding it. Should I say something? Should I speak about my disability? Will it prohibit me from being employed? These are legitimate questions that people have. The Bazaar is saying we want to dissolve that entire stigma and let people know this is a place where you can be hired on, you can grow, and we want you to be here. And certainly breaking down barriers to success. So I think that's just a great lead that they're doing, hiring people with disabilities.
So these are our closing thoughts. There are 73,563.6 people with disabilities living in DuPage County. 17.9% of individuals with a disability are employed compared to 61.8% of individuals without a disability. That right there, I believe, is just a huge statistic just to see the employment rate alone. And then going off of that, individuals with a disability are 2 times more likely to live in poverty in DuPage County. That translates to 15.4% of individuals with a disability living in poverty compared to 6.4%.
And again, the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities: improve quality of life for that individual, and greater income, enhanced self-confidence, an expanded social network, not being isolated or only being with yourself for many hours during the day, and a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of being appreciated. When we talk about the workplace and the workforce, everyone wants to be appreciated. So I think that's something there. And then again, just to go over the statement once again, a company's commitment to equal opportunity for people with disabilities and taking affirmative steps to employ, retain, and advance qualified individuals with disabilities at every level. And this is me and Kate's contact information. If you want to reach out to us and further discuss, we are available much as we can be, for sure.
Thank you all so much. I am going to get to the Q&A and we'll let folks ask some questions because I know you have many questions for this awesome group of speakers and panel of speakers. First, I just want to, again, thank Innovation DuPage for hosting and sponsoring this series. Again, it's a 3-part series, so I want to thank ID for that. And I want to thank Dr. Joshua Lederman. Josh, let me know how to say it correctly. I just realized it could be Lederman or Letterman, but Josh
it's Lederman, just like a leader. He's a leader.
Thank you. It's how appropriate. So Dr. Joshua Lederman is our chair of our DEI committee, and he has been wonderful and charismatic in his leadership of our committee. Again, brand new committee, and hopefully we've knocked it out of the gates with this first program of 3. Want to make sure that you have on your calendars to register if you haven't already. For the next 2, part 2 is DEI terminology and lexicon, why the words matter. I think we all agree words matter. And I don't know the language. Obviously, I learned way more initials and letters even today, right, than I knew about before. So that's really important because the terminology and lexicon is changing. And then part 3 is really, I know many of us are trying to figure out how to craft or what is a diversity statement for my company, my organization. And so we're going to try to get you started. Can't wait for you guys to meet the speakers, the 2 presenters for those 2 programs. They are powerhouse energy speakers. And so Tracy and Orlithia. Again, I'm going to learn their names and I'll probably say it later. But anyways, I'm going to open up for questions and answers. And Dr. Joshua, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share with everyone for our first program?
Well, I just wanted to say that we have a Wheaton Chamber DEI committee meeting, and the DEI committee is where we kind of do all the planning and getting this awesome program going. We have our next meeting is tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. and it's via Zoom, and you can go on the Wheaton Chamber website to register. I hope some of the participants today will join our committee. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and the more voices, the better our future programming will be. So thank you so much.
I want to also thank Erica added District 200, which I think is the local Wheaton Chamber or Wheaton school district, has the highest percentage of students with disabilities in comparison with other area comparable districts. So I didn't know that. And so again, this is the nice thing about sharing in a public forum like this. Erica, thank you for that information. And then Jim Bell, I know you're on. Do you want to, I know you put a note in the chat. Do you want to share a minute or two about your thoughts on this series and why Innovation DuPage wanted to be a sponsor?
Let me unmute myself first. Well, thanks, Shefali. Yeah, DEI is a pillar of Innovation DuPage's profile and what we want to be involved in, as it is with our main founding partner, which is College of DuPage. And so Katie Uram, who's on the call with me here, Katie is passionate about DEI, and I have to say that she and Vicky together have really been the impetus behind us looking to involve ourselves in DEI initiatives throughout the county. And so when she talked to Vicky about the opportunity to sponsor this event, we were all over it like a dirty shirt.
That's a new one. I'm gonna borrow that one, all over it like a dirty shirt. Good to know.
I think that may come from my British background, not American. But anyway, thanks. Thank you again, Vicky, for the opportunity. We're looking forward to the whole series. As I said in the chat room, I think all of the, solving problems starts with an understanding of the issues, and looking to learn through this series is personally what I'm looking forward to.
So I welcome everyone to unmute. Katie and Vicky or anyone else who has questions, please chime in now, or just comments to share. Please share, please ask our experts while we have them.
This is Vicky from the Wheaton Chamber. I would just want to thank everyone for this amazing collection of information. It's a lot to take in from all these, aspects of diversity. But I think something that I see in the chat, Tiffany McQueen Lewis said is, this information has been excellent, and I'm so happy we are prioritizing this conversation. I wanted to give credit to our board of directors. Yes, thank you for actually making this a priority by giving us the directive to create a DEI committee rather than, this really was the result of the protests, the cultural shift in our country as well as our community with the George Floyd murder and the response to it throughout not just our community, but the world. And we agreed as a board not to just slap on a statement and go on from there, but to actually have conversations about this and how it affects the business, how diversity, equity, and inclusion affects the business world. So we thank Innovation DuPage for being our partner in the exploration. It really is prioritizing this conversation. So thank you, Tiffany, for those words.
Others, questions for our speakers, or just your thoughts on this information?
Question, will you get copies of the PowerPoint slides? Yes, we can make the slides available, as well as we are recording this, Pat.
Hi, Shefali. This is Rhonda Pavicic. I'm with DONKA.
Hey, Rhonda.
And thank you guys for putting this on. I really appreciate this. This has been very educational for me personally. And I was just curious, will you be doing anything presenting or having companies that are already integrating really well, their culture and, I guess doing this kind of thing, like the bazaar, for example. Have you considered having some of these companies talk about, how that all works and how it's not, I think, because personally, I feel like a lot of companies think, well, this is really great, and I'm going to put together this statement, but there's a lot of work that's involved, and I don't know that I want to put forth that effort besides just a statement.
Rhonda, that's a great question. And so first, let me say, I don't speak for the chamber, but I feel safe in saying that we as a committee are very interested in hearing what chamber members want to learn or talk about in our DEI programs. So if you have ideas and thoughts, and Rhonda, I had the same thing I wrote in my only I can read notes. Nobody else can make sense of this chicken scratch. But I wrote that I think we do need a program dedicated to just, you know, disability inclusion in the workplace. And what does it look like? How did a company like Bazaar get to 36% of employees with disabilities? I mean, that's, like, you're right, there's a lot involved with that and what's involved with that. And so I actually do believe that eventually we can add that as a topic program for our committee at a later date. So I put that down for our committee meeting for tomorrow. Other questions? If not, I have a few that I can ask of Dave and Jacob, but I would love to make sure, and thank you, Rhonda, for that suggestion. I would love to make sure that we give time for others. We have about 15 minutes left in the program, and I want to make sure we leave time for everyone to ask questions or share your feedback.
I just wanted to make a brief comment, if possible.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah.
Hi, Sam.
Hello. So I grew up in the Warrenville area and went to Wheaton Warrenville South when I was through high school, and went to Hubble Middle School. And I remember a lot of presentations talking about what the demographics would look like in the country and locally, you know, in 2025, 2050. And all of those things just seemed so incredibly distant when I was going through those phases of my life. And, you know, I was one of maybe 10 Hispanic students in my grade, going through Wheaton Warrenville South. And after that, actually, the year after me had kind of an explosion of Latina students making part of the class. But really that explosion, I see it now, you know, especially as my younger brothers that are 10 years younger than me, you know, going through school and how different the demographics are there. And these types of programs are not just a piece of kind of bringing, I guess, awareness of what those numbers are, but really, how do we begin to become a community together and become more inclusive together in terms of, like, even that question of, you know, what if my company doesn't do a diversity statement? And I think it's super important that it's not just about a statement, it's about the culture. And especially as the workforce begins to diversify, it's going to be a matter of life and death, I think, for certain companies, whether or not they're going to continue to attract talent and people that are going to be, you know, excited to work in the younger generations, and whether they embrace that diversity or not might be what makes or breaks a company. I know that Millennial and Gen Z consumers are very different than consumers in the past, and a lot of the times, the things that we consume are based on whether the companies share the values that we as individuals have. And I think that these types of conversations are so incredibly important to bring awareness to that. And to be able to kind of take us to that next level as a community. So thank you again, Wheaton Chambers. I'm also a part of Innovation DuPage, for those of you that don't know me. So thank you, to the Wheaton Chamber. Thank you, Katie, for the work on this. And we're really looking forward to the next topics.
Great feedback, Sam. And I completely agree with you. I, like you, grew up not in DuPage County, but in my school, I was one of 3 people of students of Indian descent. The others were my family members. And then I left, and 5-10 years later, 15 years later, it was a very different looking high school growing up. So it couldn't have been a more different experience, right, Sam? Like, between you and your youngest siblings, and it is true. We have to figure out how we are going to have a more diverse community and really understand and appreciate what our customers and consumers are asking for us to bring to the table as employers, as a business community, as a community, right? Other questions, comments, feedback? Thank you for the nice comments that we're seeing in the chat. We really appreciate it. Other committee members, DEI committee members, do you have thoughts or things that you walked away with, Katie or Lulu, or?
I have one thing to say if I can.
Oh yeah, Jacob, please.
Hopping on what Sam said about, Gen Z and millennials being different shoppers and, patronizing the places that share their values. If you don't know, back in 2020, Outspoken Leaders did Wheaton Proud and Glen Ellen Proud, where it was literally just a sticker on their window saying, you know, we support you, we, you know, see you as, you know, an LGBT community. And just the anecdotal evidence that we got from the businesses that did participate, they saw a 20 to 30% increase in revenue in those first 3 months after putting up the sticker. So it's not, you know, just a matter of like, hey, we're going to say that we're diverse, but like actually actively showing it. And like Sam said, that, you know, the Gen Xers, the millennials, like they care about what the businesses care about. So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you again, Sam, for your input.
That's great, Jacob. I love that you were able to quantify that revenue increase of 20%. I mean, that was smart. However, you rolled out that campaign and asked for that information back. That's very helpful information and data. I would love to know, maybe that's another program or another conversation, but how many businesses there were involved with that. They're just having that sticker, right? We all agree that it doesn't matter whatever the issue is. We definitely, as human beings, do patronize businesses or do support businesses that support our values, and it's a given thing. Certainly, I come from the nonprofit world. We absolutely see that in terms of businesses who are philanthropic. They definitely see a whole different engagement with customers. So it's great to know that that also happens with other sectors in terms of inclusion and diversity. So appreciate that information. Other thoughts from committee members or just anyone? Questions?
I had a quick comment about gender diversity. We didn't really go into like wage parity or you know, pay parity in the workplace. But one of the data points that I've read is that when women are on corporate boards, that there's a direct relationship to an increase in revenue. So that might be something that we want to tease out a little bit later in one of our presentations.
Yeah, that question on parity is a topic, but you're right, even drilling down to the board levels, that's really great. That is on our list of ideas. And we have so many programs, there's so many great ideas. So, and if you want to join our committee, I'm going to put another plug in for Dr. Josh to join the committee. Other thoughts or feedback from our community members, Jenny, Betsy, other folks, Katie from our committee, Lulu.
Not a question, just a cheerleading the fact that this conversation's underway, and there's so much really good knowledge and experience in this group, and I'm excited that there's 2 more sessions because it's leaving me energized. So thank you.
Yay.
Actually, I'd love that leads me into talking about the next two sessions, you know, and how did we get the speakers for that? And it was from the collaboration on our committee, different members bringing different speakers, talking with them. When we talked to the 2 speakers, Oralethea and Tracy, we originally were wanting them to present the final program, which is crafting a diversity statement. But quickly we realized that it was very important to cover terminology before a company even starts with the diversity statement. You have to come to a common knowledge, common understanding about the terminology. And so they were people we really felt very confident about with the terminology. And so we wanted them to do both, and they agreed to do that. And so we're really looking forward to them, you know, transitioning series 2 into series 3, talking about the terminology. And then from there, getting into the process of some templates, some ideas of starting down that process. And the idea is that every organization needs to have a discussion about this terminology. We're going to do it at the next program, but as your organization, talking with your fellow coworkers about the terminology. And then once you do that, then you can come to that common agreed upon definitions of things. And it's going to make the diversity statement something that your company represents. So I just want to plug those next 2 programs and the speakers.
Great, thank you. Katie I saw you unmuted yourself. Is that your lead in to talk?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just want to echo what's been said and thank you, Shefali, and all the speakers. It's really heartening to see so many people joining the call today. As we continue the discussions and as all these your businesses and organizations really dive into this work, I think it's really great and helpful to remember that, you know, this work isn't something that each organization is doing on its own. So one thing that ID is doing too is we're trying to reach out and figure out what work other places are doing in the county, so we can really, you know, come together as a community and support each other, because there's lots of great organizations like this organizations with the speakers today that this is really their specialty. So we have lots of different avenues to come together and lean on.
I would just like to say something very quickly. Lulu Hertenstein with the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. I'm proud to be representing them on this conversation today, and also part of the chamber and this beautiful committee. And I just want to say thank you, really thank you so much for all of you who supported Innovation DuPage. You made this even a grander experience already. All of you who are visiting today and engaged and gave ideas, thank you so much. There's so much to take. There's the takeaway. I mean, already, I believe this is a very successful first presentation, right? I believe Dr. Letterman has done a beautiful job leading this group. And I feel honored and privileged really to be part of these conversations. The beauty of diversity, right? What a great opportunity to be different, all of us, each one of us, and to, at the same time, to be able to embrace everyone equally and the right equity for everyone. I don't know, I'm really just honored and humbled by this. And I look forward to the next presentation. I look forward to our meeting tomorrow and what Wheaton is gonna look like, what DuPage is gonna look like, what our world is gonna look like. And I'm happy to be part of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have a few minutes if anyone has more questions. Otherwise, I can, Vicki, we can give back people 3 minutes in their morning. 3 minutes is long enough to get another cup of coffee and hit the restroom. So
Before your next Zoom call.
yeah. Thank you,
Shefali,
everyone.
Thank you for your wonderful moderating. Thank you for being our facilitator today. Again, Dr. Joshua Liederman, thank you for your leadership in putting this committee together. I just, you know, there are a lot of kudos and a lot of acknowledgements. What I will say is that this is a courageous conversation. This is not just a conversation. This is a courageous conversation in a community that is, as the data shows, as David's data shows, was not diverse, has not been as diverse, starting in the 1990s. When we look back at the 1990s, I've lived in Wheaton that long and watched the community shift and change, and to have this conversation again is freeing for all of us to now go forward and say, how can we now, as a business community, I loved what David said about, you know, our neighbors being responsive and kind and acknowledging our neighbors. And we know that that business is really about relationships. So we thank you so much, all those of you who have been on this call today.
Thank you, Vicki. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on February 16th for the next program. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.